Hello everybody, today we're going to talk about this movie called Koyaanisqatsi. No, this is not a voodoo incantation, it's indeed the title of the film. But what does this mean? Actually, this title is a fusion between two words from the indigenous Hopi language. Koyaanis means unbalanced and Qatsi means life. We'll see that is pretty explicit about what the film says. Before I really get to the heart of the matter, let me give you a little background, especially by talking to you about the harsh director Godfrey Radio. He was born on March 29, 1940 in New Orleans, United States. We don't know anything about his childhood, his family, in any case nothing that is not biographical. Indeed, the rare times that Radio took part in interviews, he never disclosed anything about his private life, with the exception of a single experience. He was in his youth a ceremonist. He practiced fasting and prayer for 14 years. It might not seem important for you, but it does prove to us that he's a man of spirituality and that in one way or another it will influence his work. We also know that he is a humanist to have taken part in many charitable actions, particularly in medical aid and in the aid of delinquent children in New Mexico. The Hopi culture will greatly influence his vision of man, in particular by the legend of the three Hopi prophecies. He will share it in this film, and the successful filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, who heard about the Koyaanisqatsi project, agreed to finance its theatrical screening. This film is an experimental work. There is no narrative story and no actor. It's very hard to say that this film is a documentary. To tell the truth, it's very complicated to categorize this movie. It's only a succession of shots in motion and static. With the information we have about Wedge's life experience, the Hopi culture and our sense of interpretation, will we be able to find a way to approach this film? The first part films landscapes from all angles and other settings. Sometimes aquatic landscapes, sometimes terrestrial landscapes, sometimes aerial landscapes. All these in a rhythm switching between contemplation and dynamism. It seeks to show nature as an all-powerful entity. An entity that we humans must not defile at the risk of being destroyed in return. The message is really clearly ecological. The end of this first part demonstrates the materialism of man in all its most destructive ways. The first Hopi prophecy explains, if we dig precious things from the land, we will invite disaster. In 1980, Joe clearly felt the problem of global warming, but how did he understand it? The second part films this time urban landscapes totally composed of a population, public or singular transports, buildings, ghettos and skyscrapers. The goal here is to show humanity from an angle that does not play in its favor, like a colony of insects. Joe seeks to explain that man is free when he is taken in his own individuality, but that he must face his own servitude when he lives in a group. The message is clearly pessimistic about human nature. It demonstrates that although man is persuaded to be the master of the earth, he is in fact only a parasite who exhausts the resources of nature for its well-being. Compared to the first part, we have an even more irregular editing here. It begins by filming very slow camera movements, the ruins of the architectural project Protego in St. Louis, Missouri, and Los Angeles with its dilapidated buildings. All this to the same rhythm as the Philip Glass hypnotic music and rising crescendo. Once the music gets carried away in a frantic rhythm of violins and percussions, we witness shots for the spectacular destructions of the buildings, not unlike 9/11. This succession of rhythms is reversed when radio films the New York population like ants drawn to consumption. The sequenced montage of shots of factories manufacturing junk food and road traffic in the middle of the night in a river bordering on epilepsy and psychedelia gives a mechanical repetition effect of the daily consumption to which we submit ourselves every day. The second Hopi prophecy says, "Near the day of purification, there will be cobwebs spun back and forth in the sky." These famous cobwebs will then be the skyscrapers of New York, woven by us, the insects of Earth. So we ask ourselves, to what end for man does the author speculate? The last and third part is much slower and gentler. It exposes here the technological and mechanical progress of man in a melancholy way, as if this ascent of human progress will lead him to his own downfall. We already know in part 1 that Wejo denounces human greed as the most toxic element for the earth. In his desire to control everything, man chokes on his own source of oxygen and thus condemns himself. The third Hopi prophecy explains, a container of ashes might one day be thrown from the sky which could burn the land and boil the oceans. This recipient of ashes is represented in the film by a rocket whose takeoff goes wrong and leads to its explosion and near disintegration. This kind of ecological disaster slowly destroys our Earth, and the last sentence of this prophecy then takes on its full meaning. In conclusion, Koyaanisqatsi is a brilliant cinematographic experience to which any interpretation can be different, as this work invites reflection with only our analysis and our experience as support. Musically beautifully composed by Philip Glass, brilliantly imaged by Ron Frick, and cleverly conceptualized by Godfrey Reggio, Koyaanisqatsi is a film to see absolutely. Certainly, the postulate and the BS is not necessarily attractive like that, but to open up to this experience is to open up to 90 minutes of visual and philosophical slaps as rarely feature films have been able to propose. Trust me, this film is a must-see.